Life, culture, and current events from a biblical perspective. 2020 on Vision.
Let's talk today about one of those not so comfortable discussion topics. I want to talk about sex trafficking and slavery that's going on in our modern world today. And there are so many nations around the world. We can point to a whole lot of them. Places like China and Myanmar, Bangladesh, India, Pakistan. All of these nations and many more throughout Southeast Asia battle dreadfully with some of the circumstances where there is sex trafficking, especially of girls and young women. Well, we're going to talk about a nation in South Asia where the work of SIM is continuing. Bob Cole is SIM's Deputy Director. He's joining us. Hello, Bob. Welcome along to 2020.
Yeah, hello, Neil. I really appreciate the opportunity to chat with you today.
Bob, how significant is sex trafficking and sexual abuse that's going on in, I mentioned a whole lot of nations, and you're working in one in particular, but the one you're working in, just how significant is the issue of sex abuse and sex trafficking?
Neil, if we look globally and then drill down, trafficking of women and children for sexual exploitation is the fastest growing criminal enterprise in the world. We can get our heads around that. That's staggering. And then when we consider that around 2 million children are exploited every year in this global commercial sex trade, a quarter of those in South Asia, and certainly tens of thousands of those in the target country that we're referring to today. It's very significant. If we think of that country alone, around 200 young girls will be sold into prostitution today, tomorrow, and every day. It is an ongoing problem.
Okay, let's just reflect on that for a few moments. 200 girls every day. Today, right. Tomorrow, and every day for the rest of this year, every day for the rest of this decade, young girls taken into prostitution, sex trafficking, abused sexually.
That's right.
Bob, you've got a number of projects that you're highlighting, that you're working on. One of those called the Red Light, Green Light Project. What is that all about?
It's a very sensitive area of ministry, Neil. When we think of where SIM missionaries are working today, we are targeting communities where Christ is least known. And some of these are the most marginalized and isolated people groups in the world. And if we think of this target country and the people group that we're working with, those young women and children that are caught up in sex trafficking, there's an incredible opportunity not only to rescue them, but also to help improve their life and also to see them moving forward to a better way of life, if you like, in the future.
But when we talk about women and these young girls who are being tricked, well, on the other side of the equation, there are those who are trafficking these women and girls, and it's a huge industry in these nations. People are making a lot of money from this level of prostitution. You're up against a huge financial industry, aren't you?
Yes, absolutely. It is. It's a criminal enterprise. And the word there is enterprise. There's a lot of money involved. Therefore, there's a lot of power associated with corruption and bribery. And so it's very difficult for us to even enter into some of these locations without some police or government assistance to meet with these young girls that are seeking to be rescued. Then there is often legal proceedings that are required to follow up on their rescue. Whereby the government authorities are asking these young girls to become witnesses in a trial where they testify against the brothel owner or the man or men who've raped them. And so it's a very complex world, and certainly a complex underworld that supports this industry.
But when you have rescued one young girl or one young woman from the streets, and you begin to go through a process of healing, of rehabilitation. Describe what that looks like for us, Bob.
Well, now, when a girl first arrives at the home, they undergo several steps of rehabilitation rehabilitation. So they're initially going to receive medical care. Some have been horribly abused, even tortured sexually. So they're given that care, they're provided the medical support and attention, but then they go on to receive the psychological care that they need, because for the majority of them, they're incredibly traumatized and they experience the symptoms of trauma, and they require highly skilled people to support them, encourage them, help to restore something normal in their lives. And of course, the home isn't, large in terms of how many will accommodate. There's usually only a dozen girls in the home at any one time for, say, up to 6 months as they're undergoing treatment and care. But they're in a loving and parenting environment. And for some, it's maybe the first time that they really experience Christian love in their lives, or after many years of being abused. And then they go on to receive training, skills training, some very simple things like developing arts and crafts skills, sewing. Many have missed many years of their education, and so they attend school. And we help to educate them and train them. And of course, the day is made up of a variety of activities, of school, but also of counselling sessions, and some fun things like creative outlets such as dance and drama and so on. And many of them go on to be able to set up their own little business in the future as they're self-supporting. Our hope is, of course, that the majority of them are able to be reunited with their families, because they're, in a sense, they've been kidnapped or abducted, and their families have been searching for them. And of course, through this ministry and work, we're able to put many of them back into their family unit.
Bob Cole is our guest. He's Deputy Director and Partner Relations Director for SIM. We're talking about a South Asian nation where the SIM outfit is working, and their programs called Red Light, Green Light Project, and also Girls Off the Street. Bob, stay with us. We'll continue our conversation in just a short while. We're taking some time to explore some of the things that are going on in South Asia. When we talk about all of those countries, from South Asia up into North Asia, where sex trafficking and exploitation of particularly young girls and young women is rife. Bob Cole from SIM is our guest, and we're talking through some projects, the Red Light, Green Light project, and another one called Girls Off the Streets. Bob, when we talk about the sorts of people who are involved in these sorts of rescues, bringing people out of sex trafficking, I imagine you've got those mum and dad types who are caring for young women in your rehabilitation centres, almost bringing young women into a family setting where they might not be used to a family environment. Then you've got those others who are doing the rescues off the streets. I imagine they've got to be a little more streetwise and a little tough on the people that they're dealing with.
Oh, absolutely, Neil. We see all sorts of people with different backgrounds involved in partnership in this ministry and the work that we're doing. We certainly need that confrontational component in the rescue operation, that there is a boldness. There certainly is very often police or government support for our workers as they're going into these areas and/or districts. Very often, police and authorities raid brothels and rescue what appear to them to be underaged children or girls. And so often they bring the girls to us to be cared for. And of course, there is that other element of the aftercare, that the follow-up. What happens when a girl arrives at the front door? Who brings them in? Who welcomes them? Who begins the process of getting to know them and bringing them out of themselves? And very often, they are so traumatized they won't even speak. They don't trust anyone. They've been sexually abused over very often many years, and they've lost the sense of self-worth. They're incredibly embarrassed and traumatized. And so someone needs to show that love and a Christian love toward them, to bring them out, to involve them in the day-to-day activities, and it's a process that takes place over many months. So these carers need to be really motivated by the Lord, really, to provide the love and the help and the care that's needed. They're not doing it for profit. They're doing it out of compassion. And so we're really excited to, as an organisation, to be working with such partners, not only in the target country and other areas where we have similar work. And it's exciting also to see the results, Neil.
And I guess the results that start from when that young girl or that young woman is taken off the streets or out of that brothel, and they're given medical care. They need medical care as soon as they're brought into your safe sanctuary, and that love begins to take its form with all sorts of expressions from that point forward. And it's a whole learning process of learning to be loved in a way that we might think of love.
And after having been abused for so long, I mean, the stark contrast is incredible. For example, we had one young girl come into the home recently who wouldn't speak. When the police questioned her, even with simple yes or no questions, she wouldn't even respond by nodding her head one way or the other. After many months, as we were working with her, we were also preparing her for the day that she would have to testify in court against the man who'd raped her. But incredibly, this little girl who wouldn't whisper a word 6 months before when she came to the home was able to stand in the courtroom and give a clear and confident statement before the judge. An incredible transformation had taken place in the home as a result of the love she was shown. And one of our carers overheard her on the phone to her mum. She was to be reunited with the family. She said, "Mama, why are you crying? What happened is already in the past. I know I have a new future." And what an incredible testimony to the transformation of God's love in this young girl's life.
And it begs the question, Bob, how does a young girl get caught up in sex trafficking in the first place?
Very often they're simply kidnapped off the street, or they're bewitched by a man, a young man who says, "I'm in love with you, come away with me to the city." And he is simply dealing in the trafficking of young girls. And so when they arrive in the city, in the country in which we're working, the girl is then turned over to the traffickers, to the brothels, where she's abused. And after a period of time, she doesn't want to go back to her home. She's so embarrassed and traumatized by her experience. One young girl told us, 7-year-old Lebanese said to us, "One day I went out to buy ice cream. I never came back. I was kidnapped and held against my will. And I was sold 4 times before I ended up working in a brothel." It is just insidious and certainly evil when we think of this whole trade.
And it might be easy to think that these are isolated incidents, but they're not at all. The numbers of women and children who are caught up in sex slavery in South Asia is staggering.
Absolutely. I think I mentioned before that around 250,000 women and girls are trafficked in South Asia every year. And that goes back to thinking of how this whole industry is operating globally. Around 2 million children exploited every year in the global commercial sex trade. But it's really hard for us to get our minds around those sorts of numbers. But it's real. It's documented. And it's going on, despite all of the efforts and activities of various governments, of the legislation that's set up in many, many countries to prevent it and to punish it. It continues to take place, and it's increasing, Neil. That's the scary thing.
You mentioned that your goal, of course, when you've got a rehabilitation and a home that these young girls can get this reorientation, the goal is to actually have them move on from the home and sometimes be reunited with their parents, other times to be able to stand on their own 2 feet and be protected in the way that they are able to care for themselves. What happens when you've got that girl ready to go? There must be a lot of good news stories.
Oh, there are, and that's the wonderful outcome is that there are SIM missionaries working in this environment, sharing Christ's amazing love with these young girls, and there's also a transformational outcome, which is the whole purpose of the Red Light, Green Light project, is to transform the lives of those who've been abused and to help them to stand. And Tina, one of the girls who rescued through the ministry, said, "I'm living proof of a powerful God who is able to bring back what is stolen." And that's, again, another testimony of how a young life has been rescued and restored and able to stand again without the shame that they once experienced. And in very many cases, be able to return to their family, but where they'd been abused by their family, sadly, and possibly sold into prostitution out of a need in poverty and or being deceived and or being bonded in some way to a brothel owner, they can't go back to their family. We're helping to set them up, as it were, in their own business or help them to find employment.
Well, Bob, SIM, a well-known ministry mission organisation, a long history, and these programs we're talking about today, the Red Light, Green Light project and Girls Off the Street project, I imagine that there must be significant financial needs, and I know that there'll be listeners who have been captivated by the sorts of things you've been sharing with us in this conversation. How do people support an organisation like yours and make sure that those dollars go into helping these young women?
Neil, that's very simple. I mean, ultimately, we need millions of dollars for a project like this, for the ongoing need and operation of the project. But we're trusting God to provide those needs, and He does. And He does that through people. He does it through His people primarily, and we receive many donations every year through our website to this particular Red Light, Green Light project or the overarching project of Girls Off the Streets. And we're just amazed to see how those funds come in, and we're excited and privileged to be able to transfer those funds to the field every month for use in the ministry. And it's not a costly exercise to sponsor a girl every month. It costs around about $65 a month now to provide the support, medical care, the trauma counselling, even the legal support, paying lawyers to help represent these girls in court. Their education is all wrapped up in a very neat package of $65 a month.
Well, Bob, I'll point people to your website where they can get some more detail, read some more about these projects we're talking about. It's www.sim.org.au. That's sim.org.au. Our guest, Bob Cole, is SIM's Deputy Director and Partner Relations Director. Bob, thanks so much for taking time today to share these things with us about what's going on in South Asia and the projects you're running.
Neil, thank you so much, and God bless you for the ministry you have.
Before you go, thanks for listening.
There's lots more great audio on demand, or you can listen to us live at visionradio.org.au.
And remember, Vision is listener supported. Your donation,
large or small,
will help us continue connecting faith to life for hundreds of thousands of people across Australia and around the world.
Learn more or donate today at visionradio.org.au.